FlashinTO version, what is it, 106?
106.
106 panel. I don't think I need this. It's not even on.
Well then speak up, yeah.
Let's put it in the professional.
I wanted to use this panel as a way to explore a subject matter that me and Rick have been talking about, and it's something of interest to me on a personal level, but also for Rick too. And this is a bit of a dry run. We wanted to just explore areas. I'm very, very happy with the panelists, and they're all very esteemed gentlemen and good friends, and influences and uses of mine too. So without further ado, I'll introduce them. Jason Krough from KiDigital Design, Andrew Smyk from Sheridan, David Girolami from KiDigital, and Jeremy Bell from TNM. Please give them a nice I've got different things that I wanted them to contribute. So there was no real format to this. I just kind of threw in I had a bunch of questions that I have been collecting for the last few days, and I think the images will probably stimulate something else. But more than that, I just thought the conversation would flow, and from that we could ask each other questions, get deeper into things. Just to give you some background on each of the speakers, Jason has been a huge influence on me just even getting into this area, because he's been doing this for over 10 years that I know of, possibly longer. He's worked with companies like, well, there's many to mention, but CBC Kids was one that I know that I've been for a long time server of. So understanding how kids think and how they play is his game. Dave works with Pixel Gallery that do installations, and very recently did one that really influenced where I was going with this kids installation. So it's how to make kids happy when they're maybe not, that is just a great thing in itself. There's deeper things to it, and we'll get deeper into that. Andrew is usability extraordinaire, amongst other technical things, but also as a father, as inside knowledge, and
been using my kids as guinea pigs.
Basically. Jeremy probably the same as well, right? Yeah, I think. And in terms of and so I guess this will lead into the first question, and I'll start with you, Jeremy. Just how does what can we learn from today's youth, and how does it affect things like design and usability, particularly? I mean, your company is leading in usability, and I just want to kind of explore that. What can we learn that might be, that could be influential on that now and for the future. I think the future more so, in terms of
apostrophe on the today.
What I've taken from watching, at least anecdotally, what my son does with the various gadgets and gizmos that we have at the house. What I take away from that is how they actually interact with it. More importantly, how rudimentary their kind of understanding of things are. They don't understand. They can't read. At least my kid can't read yet. He's only
show some pictures of your kid.
So he's only 2. He can't read. So there's not, when he's looking at things, he's reacting to the kind of basic shapes that are in front of him, the colors. And I've been incredibly amazed with how he's managed that.
Guys with the eye food.
Yeah, fully embracing his father's kind of Mac nerdom. Yeah, so I mean, what I take away from him is really how he's, from an interface standpoint, simplification. How simple can it be? We have Apple gear at home, specifically the iPad and the iPhone, and he picked up immediately. There's no instruction manual. He was one, and he figured out how to slide to unlock, and he figured out where his little apps were in the folders and whatnot. And they didn't have to show him; he just kind of did it. And anecdotally, I recently got a Samsung Galaxy Nexus, and he didn't know what to do with it. Like, he literally looked at it, there's no buttons on the front, he couldn't figure it out. So watching him interact with something that's very similar in a lot of ways to the Apple products, to interacting with something that, in this case, this is him trying to interact with a desktop machine. So this is a monitor.
Great.
And he was very upset with, like, why doesn't this work? He was pushing on the dock trying to get the things to operate. Again, just sitting back watching how he was so instinctively going to try and touch and move things around, and he doesn't understand the concept of the mouse or the keyboard. So that's from what I've learned from him, is really just stripping everything down to its kind of bare basics, the obvious things Anything else beyond that?
Does that affect your day-to-day design work life? Do you think, oh, this client, oh, it's just a small kid in a big person design? They just need simplified design.
It does. I would say sure. You have to obviously understand who the audience is that you're going to be targeting. Like, what are they trying to do? Like, if you're targeting someone who is a power user, I mean, I've always believed in having the obvious stuff in front and having the more complicated pro features there, but not necessarily as the first thing you see. So yeah, I mean, sure, I would say it works into how I look at my clients and the products and services and whatnot that we're
There's definitely got to be commonalities between that whole broken system thing. I mean, I just find that on a week, I wouldn't say daily, but on a weekly basis, TVs, like, things just don't work for small kids who have one taste like the Apple as it was.
I gotta pipe in on that because I think one of the things that's interesting is that people often attribute that kind of effect to the iPad and kids' exposure to the iPad. It probably does have a bit of influence, but the truth of the matter is that kids were doing that long before the iPad. The natural way of kids interacting with media is physically by touching and moving it. So when we would do online games, sitting in front of a computer screen, the kids wouldn't go for the mouse, they'd start touching the stuff that was interesting on the screen. And when they watch TV shows, you see the same thing. You see literally kids touching, getting up and getting their hands all dirty with the TVs. So in a way, I think Apple in their design has actually played to very intuitive, very base kind of ways of interacting with content, rather than the other way around.
Good point.
I'm just going to mention that as I was kind of assembling some images, it is very Apple-centric. And I'm not, I'm bipartisan, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of...
So you got your...
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah. Dave, I wanted to touch on that. A long time ago, I remember Zach Simpson set out some installations.
Yeah.
And just watching those kids interact. And these installations, everyone's complex and kind of...
Well, I think, obviously the proliferation of physical installation type activities is far more ubiquitous than it used to be maybe 10 years ago. So when I first showed this kind of, shadow motion tracking installation stuff at, and I showed it at, it was one of our first exhibits, and it was at a restaurant, and we invited as many people as we could find to come out to it, and it was sort of like a first test, because who knew what anyone's reaction would be to this, because I've never really seen this stuff out there and put in front of people, so I was totally amazed by it. But Zach said to me, he's like, the biggest difference is that when children go to it, there's no contemplation of why this can't work, or there's no amazement behind, like, oh my God, what's driving this? How am I able to do this? It's so intuitive to them, like you said. It's like, they've been doing it. This is a natural reaction for them. They're just like, oh, yeah, I get it. And they're able to control this thing in a natural sense far more easily than adults. Adults seem to spend a lot of time contemplating, how should I do this? How is this working? Oh my God. To them, it's either, it gives them instant gratification, and the simplicity of how you've designed it perpetuates what they do next, and it either works or it doesn't, kind of thing. They're the perfect test case and litmus test for, is it engaging or is it not? Did it meet that goal? Because you're going to find out like that.
I like with the installs that you don't have any embarrassment. Then it's like,
yeah, and there's no, it's unfiltered, natural reaction.
Plus kids have that natural, like their suspension of disbelief is much lower, so they buy into whatever the situation calls for. So they're not going to be, yes, I can touch that. Whereas adults kind of go, should I? Or, there's all these questions that kind of go through an adult's mind.
Personal rants.
Yeah, personal rants. Will I break it? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, we have was one app called SoundShaker, which basically just presents you with a blank screen, and anywhere you touch generates a little circle, which then becomes sort of a musical toy. And when we showed it to a lot of adults, like we put it in front of them with this white screen, and they would just sit there and we kind of want to watch, like how long. They'd be like, what am I supposed to do? Like and how are the kids going to know what to do? And it's like, I guarantee you put this in front of any 2 or 3-year-old. They will tell you.
They will do that.
They'll do this,
yeah,
and they'll figure it, and then they'll see that happen. But it is very interesting about the different expectations. I find a lot of interactive books. Like remember the the Alice in Wonderland app that came out, which had this sort of neat little physics engines applied to it. And I think for a lot of people it was great because there was this visual expectation of a book. It looked like a book with the edges of the pages and stuff. But then, oh my God, it moved. But I think for a lot of young kids, there aren't necessarily those built-in expectations. So now, of course they do.
This is just a personal thing that you reminded me of, but Owen Goss has done some apps, one of them being, I might have them actually, but it's
they use musical hands.
Yeah, the musical hands. So for I guess for over 2-year-olds, it might be fine, but I've got a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and the 1-year-old is kind of broken because she does, this is the motion that she does on the trackpad too, just this. All the time. I don't know what Apple program this is. It closes things. It like
well, they put in the multi-finger gestures, and that actually has caused havoc.
Yeah. With
preschool apps, and you can. I think it's on by default now. And so we get so kids just start swiping out of apps by accident.
So they're good for beta testing and stuff, or
yeah. I mean, when we did Soundshaker, I remember it was very early days, and development was a bit tricky, and the developer we were working with was like, great, here it is, and it worked and fine, but as soon as we put it in front of a 2-year-old, they didn't use it the way we used it. They went, and it crashed every time. So we had to send back to him over and over again. He was literally like, I've never seen this many touch points coming at me. So
this is a learning point, and that, I mean, that's, when I was saying what can we learn, these are the things that you don't know when you're designing it.
If it's multi-touch, they're going to mash it like crazy. You have to write your code to deal with it.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the commands like that.
Kids also don't like to wait, so it's like
That's true.
touch, loading. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Kind of that brings me to a different vocabulary, like things like loading, and I think you mentioned different, the vocabulary that kids have is just great. Like I never, apps.
Yeah, it's me. My kid can't say his name, but he can say apps. Like it kind of can say, like he's got a bunch of other kind of apps that he plays with, and he can clearly say the names of those. It just kind of blew my mind the other day that is built. That is his vocabulary now. He's learning these things that obviously previous generations. Whoever, like, I don't think we as adults ever said apps until recently.
Apple.
Apple, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder, like I think, I watch my nephew, I don't have kids myself, but I just have a plethora of nieces and nephews, so I'm watching them all the time. And one day I was kind of amazed that my nephew was like, every screen he sees now, if it's not touchable, he doesn't understand why it doesn't react. Obviously not every screen is at this point in time, so it's like, I found that kind of fascinating because yes, they've been doing the same thing for years, but at the same time, I don't remember kids going up to TV screens and expecting that if they touch it,
the compulsion to do it in the first place is there, built in. I think it's the most hard, but yeah, you're not going to go and do that experiment over and over again if it hasn't reacted.
Yeah.
The other one I always like is that if something doesn't work the way the kids expect, like if something looks capable but it's not, what does a 2-year-old do? They press harder. They press really hard. This is pretty good blast. Like so far, we only had one breakage in a testing session, but it's hilarious how they'll literally just sit there and start they want to stand on the damn thing. And if you think about a physical toy, that's the reaction you have. It's stuck, so it's easy to push it.
Unstuck.
Yeah. Shake it around a little bit.
How were we when we were young? I remember.
Toys were made of wood.
No, I just remember my digital experiences. I remember game tantrums, healthy behavior.
I think technology was so much expensive, so that if you were given, something, your parents would like, this cost.
This arm and a leg.
And if you break it,
I used to have a rubber keyboard. I think those might be restrictions of those.
You saw one of the pictures earlier of the busted iPad. That was mine. And mean, my kid dropped it. Actually, my wife was holding it, and he wanted to play with it, and he kind of like swatted at it, and it broke. And I mean, in retrospect, I haven't had that moment where I've been like, be gentle with it. He seems to instinctively know that it's heavy, and it like he doesn't seem to throw it around. But on the flip side, it's class. I'm like,
that brings up a good question to me. I mean, I feel like the first time I bought one of these kind of devices, and I bought it well before the iPhone existed, kind of thing. And I've never seen this thing as so precious as the first one I ever bought, even though it's considered a very precious thing by many. I wonder, as parents, and I'm not a parent, so you haven't experienced that? Would obviously you're handing it over to your child, so there's quite a good chance that something can happen to it. And Rick mentioned something about a casing.
There's the Fisher-Price case that you can put your iPhone or your iPod Touch into.
Yeah, we put a pad now as well.
Yeah, there's a big rubber. Like I've since seen them, and I admittedly haven't purchased one yet. I don't know. I never. He loves it so much that I don't know. To some extent, I should put it in something just to be a little less stupid. But
it obviously doesn't matter that much then. I mean,
well, it does. It broke, and I was like, shit. Like I now have to go to the Apple Store and get it fixed. And the guy's like, it's gonna be $300 to fix. I'm like, okay, so I'm not fixing it. I kind of wish it wasn't broken, but on the flip side, I was okay with giving it to him.
Right.
We've got a question at the back. Just before you ask the question back, I'm just randomly changing images in the back. It'll be a long one. But please ask.
In making these apps, is anything special done to lock the app in? Because you're saying they're bashing on stuff, and how many times they actually sort of leave the app and go sort of like, they hit the home button or they hit sort of something. Is there something that you try to do to know?
No, I mean, we actually have a term for it, which is being homed, which means that they've decided they don't want to wait for your loading screen or whatever it is. Yeah, so they know that home button. And we always have clients who are like, we don't want that. Can you make that stop working? And I'm like, no, but I'm kind of glad, because in a way, it just, you just have to make your experience that much more engaging and better. There are some cases actually that physically make it difficult. There's a little product you can put over, what's called
tape.
Basically a little thing that decal sticks on here, and it makes it very hard to press that button. But yeah, for the most part.
I have noticed just anecdotally with the apps that my kid plays with. When the iPad first came out, there were apps that came out that were kid-centric. And they were just like, you push a button, you go to the settings screen, you push another button, you like go to another section. The kid wouldn't know, and my kid was like, I don't know what's going on here, and like would go at it. And they've since changed them so that you kind of push and hold. There's a little bit of a timer that appears, so you can't accidentally, because they're not intuitively, like I'm gonna go to this section and I know what I'm doing. They're just banging, tapping and stuff. So they put little safeguards in notice to try and prevent kids from getting into that kind of stuff. But yeah, can't stop.
Sometimes we use like a two-tap thing to hide things, or I've seen people use a gesture, or you tap and it says, tap in the opposite corner. This is all to access sort of more apparent focus parts of the app.
Which more is?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I'm just showing, just in the background, this is just an example of my 3-year-old and how she navigates. This is a cupcake game where you have to replicate images. I've got a bunch of
looks tasty.
Well, you would say that, just...
Does she ever try and eat it?
No, but I've noticed the time that they will play games is kind of sometimes very short and sometimes just extraordinarily long, like they'll never get bored of a certain part, and other times it'll be like, she can navigate fully, like back to home button, swipe, next game, load, and so the kind of random swapping between, I'm going to go back to that one now.
They definitely know what they like, at least.
Yeah.
Like there's a couple other pictures of my kid playing the guitar. His big thing is he's got this little banjo and a little guitar. He loves music. But he can't. He doesn't understand. But he can strum with music. So he'll go into YouTube. He'll go into like favorites that I've set up and find like. I went through and set up a bunch of like Raffi and like other things. He knows how to go in, knows how to go to favorites, knows how to find the thing, and then he'll go get his banjo, come back, and he'll play with it. And he's just like strumming, like he's not no chords, and he'll do that for ages. You put an app in front of him, doesn't like the app, he'll just hit the home button and move on. So
kids are very self-regulating when they're younger. It's when I have a 9-year-old, and you basically have to wrench the stuff out of their hands at some point because they won't let go. Whereas the 3-year-old and the 5-year-old, they're like, I'm bored, I'm done. And they'll move on to something else.
You can say, just before we get the next question, so that's a question for you, Rick, what you think is how much time is too much, how much is, I mean, I know it's kind of personal as well, but there's obviously, there's probably, you know, and then the age difference as well, it's also
well, from the age perspective, I use the model that the Toronto School Board has, like for every grade, 10 minutes of homework.
Right.
I've cut that in half, so you know it's like she's 9, she gets 45 minutes, but that's television and screen time. So you know it's either one or the other. Whereas the younger two are basically like they'll play an app, they'll do a couple things, and also they'll be kind of like, you know, there's crayons. I can do this better with crayons. And they'll drop the drawing app and they'll run off and grab their crayons and stuff like that.
Is that interesting? I mean, you've probably done more research. I mean, this is just a personal thing for us, but it's a professional thing. Is the kind of papers on, you know, has people done research on?
Yeah, so there are professional opinions on how much screen time you should have in apps. So the Canadian Pediatrics Association, the US Pediatrics Association generally hold the policy